You're listening to another episode of Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. This is the place where you're entitled to Brad's opinion. And now for your host, Brad Allard.
Hello, everybody. Had a beautiful day, beautiful week. Got lots going on. Today, a very special show. We have our state representative, DeWayne Burns, on the show, which I'm very pleased to have. And we're going to be talking about vouchers. We'll be talking about the border, various other things. If you have questions for Mr. Burns, just log in, put them on the screen. We'll get to them as best we can. How long have you been in the legislature?
Well, time flies. Mm-hmm. It's I'm just begun my fifth term, mm-hmm. So but just begun my 10th year serving in the Texas House.
Well, you may not be aware. I teach at Hill College. I teach state and local government, so I have a fairly good idea what's going on down in Austin, and I have to tell you, it's concerning. And I've been on the show, on one of my mini rants about, some of the stuff going on in Austin concerns me a great deal. Mm-hmm. And what's going on within the Republican Party concerns me a great deal. But we'll get to that after we get to the sponsors, and then, like I said, if y'all have questions, just drop them on by, and it'll be great. All right, so thank you to Our Place in Otto. Have you ever been to Our Place before?
I have, you bet.
I figured you might.
Absolutely.
Everybody goes to Our Place. And he also, you're from the Cleburne area, right?
Yes, sir.
And they have one in Cleburne
We
now.
sure do.
Yeah. He also is opening up Gina's Pizza, which if you're a Burleson resident, it's been a long-time pizza place, and he bought it, and he's refurbishing it, and it's going to be very, very nice. But Our Place is a really good place to have these kind of events if you ever wanted to have one. I'm just volunteering Otto for you. But no, he's a good community person. And also, Wild Cigar, another community group, Nathan and Chris over there. Are you a cigar smoker?
I'm not.
Well, it's a good place to start.
Yeah.
They have a really nice humidor, and it's a nice bar, and it's a good place. They had the game on yesterday, and you could actually hear yourself think. It's like it's not like a sports bar. It's a nice place, and a lot of businesses have their meetings there because they have a nice conference room, and then afterwards they can enjoy a cigar or something like that. So thank you, Chris and Nathan, for what you do. Also, thank you to Tiffany Nico. She is the operator and owner of Local Life magazine. It goes to 30,000 homes, plus a lot of the retail outlets get multiple copies, and they'll have them on the counter or the coffee table or whatever else. And so it has a pretty good reach, to say the least. Are you going to have a Democratic opponent?
I'm not this cycle, no, sir.
Okay, well, if somebody runs against you, then you can use that as a advertising, because she goes all over this District 58. It's still 58, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Because, all the gerrymandering they do. But they haven't really done a lot of that in our county.
Right.
They did for U.S. Congress District 25, and then also they changed Senate district. I'm now in 10 after being in 22 for our 30 years, but there you go. Anyway, thank you, Tiffany. Also, thank you to Southern Jim. You got to take Mrs. Burns there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my wife works here too, but that's just a side issue, because she comes home and shows me pictures of all the pretty jewelry. I'm like, hey, come on, we're trying to, make some money here, right? But it's a very, very nice place. It's over at the Standard, over off Hidden Creek, and Gayla Moores owns it, and she's a very, very respected jeweler. People come from about 2 hours away just to come to that store because she knows what she's talking about. They do repairs and have a great inventory. And so it's a very well-respected jeweler. And so thank you, Gayla, for all your support. Also, thank you to two maids, Brenda Ramirez. She'll be on the show a week from tomorrow. She is one of my networking friends, BNI networking friends, and they do all sorts of commercial and residential cleaning. They do the Windmiller building, for example. They do Gayla's Place, plus the other stores and businesses there at the Windmiller. And if you're interested in contacting her, 817-764-0733. The interesting thing about her and her business is that once the service is done, you rate the service, and that's the basis of the pay. It's not like a per hour or a set fee for X amount of square feet. It's like, we'll come clean, you tell us how we did, and that's what we'll charge you. And it's a pretty good deal. So also at twomaidscleaning.com/Burleson, if you're interested in that. Also, Old Pro Roofing here in Burleson and Old Town, John Williams, 817-734-2756. John is a very, very fine man. It's a very fine company, and they've been around for about 20 years, and they're home folks, and he'll come check your roof out if you had some water leakage over the weekend. He can come tell you what the problem is, or he'll tell you have no problem. So he's not there to upsell you, make you feel like your house is falling down, that kind of thing.
It's important to have local folks, especially when you're getting estimates on roofs and damage, things like that.
Exactly. We do. Burleson, one really good things about it, they do strive to shop local. And, I don't begrudge these out-of-towners trying to make a living, but, I want to know where John Williams is in case I had a roof problem or there's some issue involved. And they'll come and fix it, whatever it is. Same thing with just about any other service like that. Plumbers like Matt Cobb Plumbing. I'm going to use Cobb Plumbing because I know where he is.
Yes, sir.
And that kind of thing, as opposed to something like, Big Outfit out of Dallas. So it is important. And it also pays the taxes in our community. So there you go. And lastly, Camco Mortgage. Oh, I see, Taylor, you changed up the logo a little bit. Sammy Campbell, Candy Gal, they've been doing mortgage work here for 20 years. Now they're doing it for themselves. Camco Mortgage, they're still here at the B&G building in the third floor of the south building. Call Sammy at 817-778-4592 or Candy Gal, 817-925-2661, and they'll tell you what's going on with the rates. That's confusing enough for most of us. I've used them twice in other places they've been, and these two ladies do wonderful work. Okay. Well, we got a lot to talk about. Yeah. The biggest issue seems to be driving a lot of this election is the voucher issue. And if I recall, you voted against vouchers. Why did you do that? And I'm not a big fan of vouchers either, so I'm not accusing you of anything.
Sure.
But what was the basis of your vote?
Well, I can make it a long story or a short story, however you want it.
The floor is yours. You can take as long as you want.
Great. So we had 4 special sessions after our regular session, and this was placed as an emergency item by our governor. And the simple answer is, as the bill came through, and we were asked to vote on it in the House, there were a couple of components to it. There was a voucher provision to it, and that was tied to several other provisions that would have increased teacher pay raises and some other things. Some public education funding was tied to that. They were kind of married together in that bill. But the problem with the voucher, as I saw it, was just expensive. Mm-hmm. It was way too expensive. In the first 2 years, the first biennium, it was going to be $1 billion, and then estimates had it at $2 billion in the next year, and then $2.3 billion the following year, and it was just too expensive. This was new spending. Okay, this wasn't coming out of what we had budgeted in our budget for education. This was new spending. So we were creating a new subsidy, a new spending program to send folks to private school, and it was going to be billions of dollars over the first few years. And at a time when, folks that I visit with, the 2 main issues are border security, number 1, mm-hmm. and property taxes.
Well, I was going to ask you about that later, but the voucher seems to be...
well, and that's where it ties in, is because where was this money going to come from, ultimately? Mm-hmm. And this was going to come out of the budget surplus to begin with, but we all know the surplus isn't going to last forever. Mm-hmm. We're in a great shape economically right now in Texas, but we all know that that's cyclical. So what happens when the surplus runs out? It'll come from your property tax.
That's what I was thinking as well. Is like, we seem to think that this boom times is going to last forever,
right?
But it's as far as the voucher. My biggest problem with it is that ostensibly it's designed to help people that are going to low quality schools afford private schools. The amount of money that would take to afford to take somebody out of that situation and put them in a private school is much, much greater than what was going to be allowed. Was it around $8,000?
Well, there were discussions from 8 to 10. I think we wound up at around 10 ultimately.
Well, even 10, that would cover about maybe 35, 40%.
Yeah.
And for somebody that's, inner city Fort Worth or Arlington or something like that, that's, if you're not covering the whole thing, it's going to be a real problem. Second of all is that I've taught in the private sector private schools for about 3 years. And it was interesting to me because none of the teachers I worked with there at Southwest Christian supported vouchers, because they understood what the impact was. They came from the public schools or knew people that were in it. But it costs, it's not the most expensive private school, but $10,000 won't get you there. It'll get you about, 40% there maybe. And then when you, assuming you can get into a private school with that $10,000 voucher, there's all sorts of additional money that you need, fees and expenses, trips, things like that. I just thought it was an attempt, I think, to and not to gut public schools, but it's pretty apparent that a lot of the leadership of the Republican Party have a very poor opinion of public schools.
You're exactly right, and there's and in certain parts of the state, there is the quote woke agenda, that's being pushed. I'm sure, and that scares a lot of people, and that's wrong. I disagree with public schools pushing any kind of a woke agenda or anything like LGBT agenda, anything like that. But again, if we're gonna tackle the problem, then let's tackle the problem where it is, and that's in public schools. Let's figure out what the problems are there and fix those.
Well, is your Mrs. Burns, is she a former school teacher?
She is. Yeah. Okay. Yes, sir.
So you have an idea of what's going on. It's not like this whole issue, if you will, is. Hang on just a minute, sir. Taylor, I'm having trouble sharing it. Will you take my phone and make it work? Just come on by. I don't know what's going on with Facebook, but anyway, that's why he's such the wizard. But anyway, my concern also is that this antagonism almost that the leadership of the Republican Party has towards schools, it predates you actually, because I've talked to other people in office and they're not happy with what they think is going on in public schools. Woke agendas, DEI, wasteful spending, you figure it out, all that. I don't know if this is a solution for that.
I don't either.
Yeah.
I certainly don't. And again, just to get back to the spending, I couldn't, we just voted in November to cut property taxes as a state, at an 80+% of Texans voted to reduce their property taxes. And it's the outcry here from everyone, and I just couldn't in good conscience do that and then bait and switch, and over the next few years add literally billions, 7 to 11 to, and estimates are growing, of billions of dollars to the property tax burden in the state. It just does not seem like a genuine thing to do and something I could support. The other part of it too was, and people haven't been talking about this at all, but illegal immigrants would have been eligible to receive the voucher. I don't know if you'd heard that or you're aware of that. Now I remember, but that wasn't the first thing I thought of. Right. But having illegal immigrants receiving vouchers, that'd be interesting. Now I know that as state law, it's been law since Rick Perry was governor, that if somebody's here as a resident of the school district, the citizenship issue doesn't even come up. And my last few years at Burleson, I taught some that I knew weren't documented, and I never asked. But it's obvious, and I didn't have any trouble with them. All right, it didn't anything like you see in like what we just saw last week in New York, rather. That kind of business. I never had a lick of trouble with them because they were glad to be here, and they also were told keep your head down and don't cause trouble because we don't want to be kicked out and that kind of thing. But that would be a hard pill to swallow, though, for using money to send illegal immigrants to private schools, in effect. Yes, sir, and you're right. We had a Supreme Court decision that said that we have to educate all kids, anybody that comes. We don't even get to ask the question, as you said, are you here illegally or not? And our Texas Constitution sets forth a directive that we will provide free public schools. So you put those two things together, and we are going to educate some illegal immigrants in public ed. But it's another totally different thing for me to go ahead and issue a subsidy or a private school voucher to an illegal immigrant to attend private school.
It bothers me some as well, is because the number one expenditure of the state government is higher education, public education, all that. All right, even more so than health services, which is also another issue entirely. We could do another show on that as well. But the fact that we have so much invested in our schools, and it just seems like some in the Republican Party want to drain those schools of their ability to take care of all these multiple issues. I taught for 30 years, and what is asked of me my last couple of years was much greater than my first couple of years, and not just in terms of content. That wasn't the issue. It was all the other things that the school was expected to provide, and the teachers and the staff and administrators are expected to provide. And it seems like this would be a big step backwards if we had a situation where the public schools were being deprived of money. Mm-hmm. And, I didn't mind the tax rebate at all. I got a decent check from my mortgage company, but I didn't want to do that at the expense of the public schools.
Right.
And it was sold to us that it would not affect public schools if we took this tax cut, because they give a bunch of money to public schools and all this other. Is this something that's going to last? I mean, are they going to be able to maintain the lower property taxes and the necessary funding for public schools?
I think so. Okay. I believe it will. Okay. And like I said, we're fortunate to have a surplus now, mm-hmm. and that won't be the case going forward. Forever. We just you can't count on that as an individual mm-hmm. or as a business or as a state. Mm-hmm. It's not responsible. But my point would be, if we have a budget surplus, there's a couple places that should go. Mm-hmm. Number one, either back into the pockets of the taxpayers mm-hmm. through a larger cut, or to the border to help secure the border.
Yes, I agree.
Or into, lastly, infrastructure, public education, things like that. And I think that, my first choice would be put it back into your pocket. And then, but if we're not going to do that, we need to secure the border. We don't need to create a new subsidy to send kiddos to private school.
Well, if I were in your position, my first choice would be the border. Because I know how serious it is. I'm sure you know better than we, because I'm sure you get the reports and whatnot. So I guess we can transition to the border issue. Are you in support of what Governor Abbott is doing by sending migrants to Chicago and New York?
I was at first, mm-hmm. and I think as we've seen that really not make it. I mean, it's made a difference in those areas, because now they're experiencing what we've been experiencing. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is, we need to ultimately return them to their point of origin. And we don't have the authority to do that as a state, which is why we passed Senate Bill 4 in this last special session. But I overall support what the governor's been trying to do and what the legislature's been trying to do in our attempts to secure the border. As you know, and as your listeners know, this is a federal job, and it's a bigger job than really the state of Texas can handle on its own. And we have a multi-state compact right now that we've never had before with other states along the border. We're cooperating, sharing information, sharing resources, and that's important and helpful. But ultimately, the federal government's going to have to step in and do the right thing and enforce federal law. And we've got to get a president and Congress that are willing to do that. We do that, and that will put us way ahead of anything that we can do as a state. However, until we do that, it's our responsibility, and we've got to step up. And I agree with Governor Abbott's approach to it. I agree with his basically calling it an invasion. And you put that along with what we did in Senate Bill 4, and I think there's really going to be some questions that could even reach the Supreme Court as to what are states' rights when it comes to enforcing your own border.
Well, they did rule last month in favor of the Biden administration, even though the Biden administration has been just woefully inadequate, and I think willfully so. I think there's more to it than just incompetence myself, and I'm not a conspiratist type person, I don't get into all those kind of things, but I just think that the Democrat Party nationally just does not see this as a problem, and they see political advantages with it. And what I do like about Abbott sending them to the north, mm-hmm. First of all, they're not being kidnapped, or they're not being drug out there. They're all volunteers and whatnot. But now you hear New York, Denver, Chicago, Seattle, all bellyaching about the lack of federal enforcement, whereas before they were sanctuary cities and they could pat themselves on their back and feel good about how they approach this problem. We're sanctuary cities. We welcome everybody. Wait, you took it seriously? Who are these people? And so right. I think, that may be one of the biggest issues, that if Mr. Trump wins in November, which is the polls show he's slightly ahead, that'll be the issue that does it. Mm-hmm. But when I saw our state putting like razor wire and those water buoys and all this other stuff, my first response was, it's unfortunate it has come to this, that we needed to have a better system. And, this idea that, since Mr. Biden's taken office, we've had like 3.5, 4 million that we know about. Mm-hmm. That's not sustainable in any country. And I'm just sad that in a sense that our state, particularly those folks down south, are bearing the burden of federal inactivity and lack of action.
They are.
Mm-hmm.
And really, we all are. I mean, because it doesn't stop there. As you know, Houston, DFW area are portals to the rest of the world, not just the rest of the nation. And so we see a ton of, human trafficking and gun trafficking and stolen vehicles and movement of fentanyl and other awful drugs. The drug crisis is real, and it's awful, and it's coming right through our southern border. And the cartels are, as you know, are in charge of northern Mexico, and it is a almost a military operation on their part that's well funded, and we've got to push back, and I believe we should. I believe we are, but we've got to have the backing of the federal government to really get the job done, and to really make the biggest difference.
The thing about legal immigration, I did a couple of shows on it about a month ago. And the stats will tell you that the majority of the folks that are coming are not breaking the law, but there are people breaking the law. Okay. It doesn't need to be a majority to be a problem. And I was also talking to both Dale Hanna, the district attorney, and his opponent in the Republican primary, Mr. Good, and they both are saying that because of that porous border, fentanyl is becoming a problem in Johnson County, and I'm sure in all throughout 58 and everywhere else. And so it's, like I said, the majority of them aren't criminals, but there are enough criminals in the minority to make it really hard, and that's all it takes. And being where we are in DFW, this right here on I-35 and 20 and 30, we're at pretty much the crossroads of the country. Law enforcement friends tell me that they see a lot more than they used to here in little bitty Burleson.
Absolutely, and and you're right. Probably the majority of the people aren't, but the cartels are using that as a distraction almost. We've noticed even from previous sessions when I've served that the cartels would flood an area or a position on the border, and we would have to respond with National Guard, DPS, whatever, and we're able to do that better now than we were. But we have to flood law enforcement to a certain location and all our resources to take care of a huge group that comes across, and then that leaves our borders. They can do an end run somewhere else around the border, and it's a strategy almost of what, or directly actually for what they've been doing to move all that stuff illegally across the border.
Well, another concern about the legal immigration issue is it's going to push states like Texas to a point where we just might say, we don't care what you say, Washington, we don't care what you say, Supreme Court. Our country is being invaded. And we'll be in a situation similar to what happened like 60 years ago when Mississippi or Alabama said the same thing about civil rights. And here comes the, National Guard and, U.S. Marshals and whatever else, and federal takeovers. And I'm concerned that Texas and the federal government are heading towards a collision, because we're probably the biggest thorn in Joe Biden's side about this issue.
Absolutely.
And I think we're looking at a situation where it could get kind of ugly. But on the other hand, this idea of, okay, we're going to grant you asylum, we're going to give you a court date 5 years in the future and expect you to come back, we'll see you in 5 years. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It is. It's ludicrous.
It's not a strategy. It's crazy.
I saw a news article. I was watching NBC a couple of nights ago, and they're talking about Nevada and its politics. And they were interviewing this woman who's a political activist who's undocumented. I thought, wait a minute. Why is she allowed to try to affect our politics when she's not a citizen? And that really stuck in my craw. And we want to be humane about what's going on, you know.
Of course.
You know,
They're still people.
Yeah, right. And we know what's going on in their home countries, and it's unfortunate. But I think they're just exporting their problems to us. Mm-hmm. And these people are kind of caught in the middle. And I often ask myself, if I were a father in Honduras and my family's being harassed by gangs and the corrupt government and all this other stuff, and I had a family in, you know, Idaho or wherever you want to do it, would I make that run? And so that's kind of gives me some balance on the idea. But the bottom line is we just can't be an open border, and that's what we are.
Right.
You know,
right.
So I guess that's going to be the biggest issue in the next legislature. That and vouchers, of course.
I think for sure the border security will be number one, without question.
Even more than schools?
Yes, sir. I believe so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. There's other issues facing this beloved state. You know, seems like every 2 years, casino gambling gets on there. You know, and it doesn't get very far. Do you see a day that we will have casino gambling?
Well, I can't speak for everyone else. Mm-hmm. I can speak for myself. Mm-hmm. I voted against it this time around. It's and you know, I can see, you know, it becomes more and more popular even among legislators, and the votes seem to increase to support it over time. And so it could become reality. I'm opposed to it. I'm opposed to it just you know, from a fundamental values position, but also in speaking with law enforcement and folks like that, the organized crime and the human trafficking, the other things that come along with it, the trade-off is not worth it in my opinion, and in their opinion, and I've committed to support that. So I'd have to go back on my word to support casino gambling, and I'm not willing to break my word.
Just from this observation, you can tell me if I'm wrong. It seems like the governor's more in favor of it than Dan Patrick is. Is that an accurate observation?
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for either one of them, but I know that Dan Patrick is, you know, it won't even come up for a vote in the Texas Senate. So until he's for it, there's no hope for it.
Right, but you know, as I'm sure well aware, Mark Cuban has been pushing it pretty hard here in the DFW area. They want to build a new arena and casino in Dallas and all this, even though that AAC is just fine. But, you know, of course, it's not good enough, apparently. But the pro-casino people said, why are we sending all our money to, you know, WinStar and Choctaw and, you know, Louisiana when we could have that money here in Texas? Is that a valid response?
It's a very valid response. I had to I asked those same questions too, but and it's one of those deals where you know, my personal conviction is it's a no for me, and don't harbor any resentment or ill will towards anyone that would support the idea. But I believe that the constituents in this district would support a no vote on that.
They probably would. I don't think casino gambling is the driving force in their political views about the state as much as schools and border. I mean, those two are 1 and 1A in terms of importance to them. But the casino issue isn't going to go away because it keeps coming up. And you know, I know the biggest funders of the anti-casino movement is, you know, Choctaw and WinStar, you know, out of state.
Ironically, yes.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking, and I also have read reports, would it really help the state to have casino gambling? And the answer is it's mixed. You know, you'd have some jobs and you'd have, you know, tourists and stuff like that. But you also have, like you mentioned, increased crime, increased social services, you know, increased a need for support for those that just do nothing but gamble. And, you know, it's like when the lottery came in like 30-something years ago, I was opposed to lottery because, you know, for me to go and spend $10 on a lottery ticket, okay, and I don't get anything from it, so I won't have a pizza. For a lot of people, they were spending money they couldn't afford to give away. And I think casino gambling will do much the same thing.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's going to come in this next session, but sooner or later, I think that the funding behind it and the way campaigns are funded in this state, you're going to have more and more legislators change their mind, maybe, or change the legislatures, maybe.
You may, you very well may. But I again, it didn't even get a vote in the Senate. I don't think it even got a committee vote in the Senate. So it's until the Senate's willing to move on that, it's DOA. In my opinion.
I'm just surprised that Dan Patrick is so anti-gambling because he is always looking for revenue sources and whatever else and whatnot. And
that's a great argument too. I mean, you can't discount the arguments for it. But
that's the hard thing about being a legislator because most of these issues have pros and cons that you have to consider. It isn't all black and white, is it?
No, it's not. In fact, those are the easy ones for me. That would be easy for anyone. It's those where you've got there's good and bad to each side, and trying to weigh all of that, and that's where you just got to kind of stay in tune with the people you represent the best you can, be available, be accessible, and search your own conscience and why you're there and what your purpose is, and your faith if you're guided by that, and which I'm admittedly, and do the best you can.
And that's the harder part about being a legislator. Sometimes you have to say no to probably people you like, right? I've been asked, why don't you run, Allard? And there's so many reasons why I don't. But that'd be the hardest one, particularly if I was a local official, like a school board member, something like that. I'd just have a hard time saying no to people I like, even if it's in the best interest of the organization I was elected to. But that would be pretty tough to do. Another issue that's been driving a lot of this campaigning in the primaries has been Ken Paxton's impeachment, and you voted for that.
I did,
and I found it interesting that 23 Republicans voted against it, but the rest of them voted for it. That's like a 2-1 margin in the House, and so it isn't. They were trying to make it sound like a Democrat conspiracy. Well, no, I mean, like 55 Republicans voted for impeachment. Why did you vote for impeachment?
So, and you have to have the context of it. I think on any issue, you need all of the context. General Paxton came to the legislature, asked for the funding for his out-of-court settlement, the $3 million, and refused to respond to any questions about it from the committee that was asking about why should we fund this, what's the deal, what's going on here. So there was an investigation done into why and all of the circumstances surrounding that lawsuit that he settled and asked the taxpayers to pay for. And in the course of that investigation, there were several allegations, accusations of impropriety, of illegal actions, misuse of his office. All of these things were brought out and alleged and given to us as a legislature. And so as a member of the House, I was now presented, whether you agreed with the process or not, I was presented with this mountain of allegations and accusations from reliable sources. And our job was to either sweep it under the rug and say, don't worry about it. He's one of our guys. Let's just forget about it. He's a good Republican. I agree with his approach to Biden and suing the federal government every chance we can. I agree with that, so let's just dismiss it. Or our job as House members was to look at that and go, okay, let's have the light of day shined on all of this evidence. Let's send it to the Senate, have them conduct a full trial, take testimony under oath, and look at all of these allegations, sort through it, and figure out what's true and what's not true. So, I think the people, when you hear that the House voted to impeach, I think sometimes folks that may not know, they think that means we removed him from office immediately, which we didn't do. We basically took that evidence, all of those accusations, and as the process is lined out in Texas, as we should, we sent it to the Senate and said, here, we believe there's enough here that we can't just say, sweep it under the rug and forget about it. And y'all go look at this, take testimony, conduct a trial, and see if there's anything there.
My problem with the trial is it seemed to me a foregone conclusion, because the votes for all the various articles of impeachment were almost identical. And, I know there were meetings with Paxton and many of the Senate Republicans where I don't know what was said directly, but I can only imagine he was, giving them the, get their minds right routine. And so I saw from what I saw in the reporting, that there's a lot of incriminating material here. dealing with some contractor and and getting his girlfriend a job and all this other stuff, a lot of sordid junk. And I thought this should be pretty easy, but I knew that they weren't going, Senate wasn't going to convict him. And I bet you did too.
Well, I didn't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
you're being nice.
I know that I knew I had a job to do, and I couldn't control the Senate, and whether they, whether they agreed or didn't agree or whatever they found, the right thing to do was have the light of day shine on this. Let's go through this.
And I agree, and I appreciate your vote for that impeachment, because I know that it's cost you personally or politically, certainly, and it's cost a lot of. There's been a lot of pushback on that, but I honestly believe that Ken Paxton should have been removed. And then, of course, he ends up suing the whistleblowers, but he doesn't even want to testify against them personally. And so he drops the suit when the Supreme Court said you can't sue somebody and not testify. I thought that was well, I won't say on the family show what I thought that kind of move was, but I thought it was poor,
Right,
but indicative. And so the problem with the impeachment isn't that he got away with it. It's the fact that now the Texas Republicans are using that to punish people like yourself. You're getting primaried. Is this the first time you've been primaried?
It's the second time.
Second time, okay.
Yes, sir.
But I bet your first opponent didn't send out mailers on Ted Cruz, Dan Patrick, Greg Abbott, Ken Paxton, all saying your opponent is the most wonderful legislative prospect since Solomon.
No, sir, they did not.
And yeah, I've got a couple of mailers. I don't know your opponent. I know you have two, but I'm not taking that Mr. Laird very seriously. To tell you the truth, I've gotten material from Ms. Kerwin, and it's full of testimonials from the top Republicans. And my opinion was, my favorite president was Ronald Reagan, and one of his sayings was, "Don't speak ill of fellow Republicans." That rule's gone way by the wayside now.
Yeah, doesn't exist. Nobody remembers that, unfortunately.
I know it. Has it been worth that? I mean, you would have won in a walk, even if you had a Democratic opponent now. But because you voted your conscience on school vouchers and the impeachment primarily, now you find the leaders of our state and our party actively pursuing your removal.
Yeah, it was worth it. 100% it was worth it. I'd do it again. And here's the deal. So I'm going to pull the curtain way back for your listeners here. A few months ago, the governor's office called me, asked me to come in, and they showed me, put a folder on a table and opened it and said, "Here's polling that we've done in your district regarding vouchers." And it shows, close to 80% or whatever support school choice. And I said, okay, I believe that, because depends on how you ask the question. If you ask my people if they're for educational freedom and for a parent's right to choose the proper educational path for their child, things like that, then 80 to 90, I would think almost 100% of folks would say yes, I agree with that. But if you ask them the question, are you for creating a new subsidy out of new spending that's going to raise your property taxes and to send kids to private schools, could be illegal immigrants, do you support that? And I think your number would be way lower. Well, in that book, they flipped it over and they showed me polling results where they said, if the governor endorses against you and you vote against his voucher program, we think you can be beat. And I said, well, I don't agree with your other polling, and I don't know if I agree with that polling, but I'm not going to break my word to my district. And I don't believe this is a conservative agenda item. I don't believe that the way this is being approached with this voucher, with the spending, with everything else, is a conservative deal, and I'm gonna vote against it. And I have nothing against you, Governor Abbott. We're together on 99 out of 100 issues, and we've worked together well. We're friends. Like you said a while ago, hard to tell your friends no, but you've got to do it. And I did it, and here we are. And this, the same thing with General Paxton. It's not that I disagreed with what he was doing as far as the Biden administration and all that kind of stuff, but the other improprieties, all of the other evidence that was presented to us required you to stand up and say, man, this is going to hurt me politically, but that's okay. look, here's the deal, and this is a ministry to me. I enjoy doing it. I want to do it. I love serving, and I really truly believe it's a ministry. But I don't hold on to the job so tightly that I can't be used for something else.
Well, right.
So,
well, it's certainly not for doing it for the money. I know.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure.
What is it now? Like $7,200 a session?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, $600 a month. And, and after I pay it's not quite enough to pay the health insurance, so I have to write a check to the state for about. It depends. It's sometimes around $1,100, or it could be a little more every year to cover my health insurance.
What a deal!
But that's the deal. I told some folks the other day, I believe my path, God has lit my path to here. I don't know if I'm going to win or lose or whatever, but wherever the path is lit, that's where I'll go and I'll serve. And I want to do it. I believe God's prepared me to do it. I have worked hard to prepare myself, and I will continue my commitment to work hard for the people that I represent and do what is right. But in the end, it's really about serving and about being in a ministry. And the bigger picture. I've read to the end of the book, and so we're good. You know that we're good, and God's in control of everything. And so I'll work hard. I won't worry about it, but I'll work hard.
So in this meeting, Governor Abbott was in the room.
He was not.
Oh, he's not. Okay,
no, he had his chief of staff and his deputy chief of staff and another consultant person there, and then. From there.
Yeah, I didn't think Abbott would be involved in that kind of, hardball politics directly. That's why you have staffs for.
Yeah, but some of the things he said about me last week were not nice. We're pretty hardball.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know if I saw it, but I've seen, like I said, the mailers.
Yeah.
And some of the social media. As far as did it make the news? I wasn't paying attention to that. But it was, it's unfortunate. Because I have real concerns about the Republican Party. I've been a Republican all my life, but it's been harder and harder and harder, particularly at the state level, to maintain that affiliation because my philosophies haven't changed. My principles about why I chose Republicans over other parties hasn't changed, but it seems like that's immaterial. It's like, do you support Dan Patrick? Or do you support Greg Abbott? Or do you support Donald Trump? And everything else is immaterial, and that's what bothers me. I'm not in the Republican Party to follow a person. I'm in it because I want certain government policies to be enacted, and it's like now it's almost like a cult of personality, both at the state and national level, and that bothers me.
Yeah, it bothers me too.
Because I'm thinking how am I going to vote this election? Because I don't want to continue to support this kind of move away from principles and more to personalities. And you can say, well, the same thing about the Democrats. Well, that's their problem, it's fine. They can hash it out for themselves, but this is somebody that affects me directly. And, as far as the school teachers I worked with, majority of them that were politically involved, I would say the majority of them were pretty right of center. But they weren't like this. They still wanted public schools to be well supported. They still wanted government services to be well supported. We didn't have problems with, the free lunch programs or social services, things of that nature.
Right.
We were conservative. A lot of our conservatism was driven by more moral issues, shall we say, than these other issues. But now it's really getting tough.
Right. I'm with you. I don't want to be a Republican and follow a person. I follow a set of ideals. I'm a Republican because I believe in limited government. I believe in the rights of the individual. Local control, people say, well, local control. Well, the most local of all control is the individual. I believe in your property rights. I believe in law enforcement and supporting our law enforcement. I believe in public education.
Right.
Those are all fundamental Republican values that we should be, those are the things that should drive where we're going.
This one might be a little bit more or less known, a better way to put it, by the general public, but that Death Star bill, as the papers call it, about increased state involvement over local issues. How do you feel about that?
Well, I support it because I do believe, here's the deal. Like I said a second ago, I believe in local control. Absolutely. Having served on a local school board and on an emergency service district as a fire commissioner, we've got to have local control, and those close to the people govern best. However, there are times when individual liberties can get stepped on and sacrificed in the name of, a local government ordinance or something like that. In fact, so I carried a bill, the Right to Farm Act, this session. It was a constitutional amendment. It became a constitutional amendment, Proposition 1. And the whole idea was because there were cities that were encroaching upon farmers here in the Metroplex, basically, because that property, two reasons. Neighbors had moved into areas where this had traditionally been rural. Now it was in a city. And so the neighbors didn't really like seeing agriculture. They wanted it native. But then the city also knew that this property was more valuable at market value than in ag value. So they passed ordinances, literally, outlawing the storage of hay bales in a hay field. And they fined these guys per bale per day. And I went to the city where this was happening, held the notices of violation in my hand, talked to the farmers directly, and realized we had to do something. And we found in Ellis County where a city went out and mowed down a fella's crops because they exceeded the vegetation height requirement, and mowed down his sorghum, then billed him for it and fined him for it. And so those things, that's where, local control is great, and I support our local elected officials, but we've got to watch out for the rights of the individual too. And so that's the Death Star bill you mentioned kind of takes that idea of what I just mentioned, to all aspects. But the part I dealt with the Right to Farm Act was basically protecting the property rights and the rights of these folks that have been there before to keep doing what they're doing, even in the face of a county or a city or even a state agency that for no good reason was going to create an ordinance or a law or rule to put them out of business. And these rules and laws were all made in the interest of public health. And I understand that. That's a valid concern. In fact, we've got an exception, but you've got to demonstrate that. You can't tell me that these hay bales are a threat to public health because they could attract rodents, and rodents could carry the bubonic plague. That was the reason I was given for outlawing hay bales in a hayfield in a city. And that's ridiculous.
Well, see, I thought that bill was also in response to some of the shenanigans of the Austin City Council and some of their, defunding programs and their lack of enforcement of certain things, and being a sanctuary city in the state of Texas, or tried to be. So I thought it was partly that. To be honest, I was kind of mixed because I do support local control. I have good relationships with several of the city council and school board members here, and so local control is a very important thing. And then I hear stories like this, and I've heard other stories like cities that put extraordinary restrictions on construction or contracting services and things like that, more than what should be necessary. But bureaucracies need a reason to exist, I suppose. They're self-perpetuating, and so I really didn't have a firm grip with how I felt about that law, because it's one of those, like, okay, I see the need to protect the farmers, but on the other hand, I like local control, and I don't want the state of Texas coming into Burleson and say, no, you can't do that. I know, I'm sure you're familiar with our mayor and our city council.
You bet.
There are hardly anybody's idea of left wingers or anything like that.
Not at all. No, they're a conservative bunch.
Yeah, they are, and so it hasn't occurred here. They haven't been particularly aggressive about their authorities. In fact, they are very, very prudent in how they use it. But it just, maybe not all communities are like that.
Right. And I think it's appropriate, in my opinion, to when there is an issue like that, for the state to step in and say, hey, we're going to protect the individual rights, and we're going to protect the most local of all control, the individual. And I chair the Land and Resource Management Committee, and a lot of property rights come through our our committee, and my mantra is always, let's start with what's best with for the landowner. Let's start with what's best for the person owning the property, and what's going to give them the most input into whatever policy is going to be. And so it's just a fundamental. Maybe it's because I'm from the country or whatever.
Well, you kind of answered a question I haven't even answered yet, is why do you do it? Do you feel like this is God's calling on your life to do this? And I guess the results of whatever the primary or God's will.
Yeah.
What are you going to do if God's will is that you move on?
I'm going to serve somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm going to keep praying and figuring out which way the path is lit.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly.
Well, what community do you live in?
I live in Cleburne.
Cleburne, okay.
Yes, sir. I grew up in Goat Neck, if you know where Goat Neck is.
Yes, I do actually. Out in the sticks, you know.
Southwest, southwest part of the county, out by the river, and pretty, pretty poor beginnings and all that kind of stuff. But I never knew we were poor till later. But my mom and dad worked hard their whole lives. They cared about us kids and took us to our little church out there. And I mean, I just, that means a lot to me. And I think I want everybody to have the American dream, and I want everybody to be able to fail and succeed on their own. And but in the end, I really do. I am passionate about my faith, man. I don't say those things to make people go, "Oh, look, he thinks he's somebody." I say that because you should know that about a person when they're representing you, because it's going to affect the decisions I make. You should know that, and you may or may not agree with that, but my faith is going to impact the way I make decisions. And and so folks should know that about me, and it may or may not sway how they feel about me. And some folks, that's a turnoff. They don't like that, and that's okay.
Well, in District 58, you got a lot of churches, you know.
Well, that's true.
And
that's
so,
true. I get some flack for that, though. You know.
Well, that's part of the drill, I'm supposed, and that's another reason why it's so hard to be a politician, because I'm sure you've had to develop a thick skin over the years. You know, some of the criticisms
haven't.
Really. Well, some of the criticisms aren't fair. You know, if they want to criticize your vote, saying, "Well, I would have voted this way," that's one thing. But when sometimes they can make it personal, I can imagine.
Yeah.
And that's just uncalled for. Yeah. And that's one reason so many people I talk to have no interest in serving, even in appointed positions, because with social media in particular, you got a lot of internet tough guys that want to take shots. And, and all this other business. And it just, they'll say things about you that they'd never say to your face. That's really been one of the real downsides of social media. I mean, I know you could use it to do what we're doing here and to promote yourself and put, on Facebook. I saw there was an ad on Facebook today with your family there and the dog, I believe. So,
probably so.
And so it helps. But then on the other hand, to get this other business and, I wish we could do without that, but
I do too.
But it's First Amendment, right? That's what
exactly
they say.
Right.
We're coming close on time. See, and if you want to say something directly to voters, that's the camera to do it. You can say whatever you like, and as long as you like, and you can clip this and use this in your own social media.
Well, I appreciate that. I really just wanted to come on and visit with you and answer any questions you had, because I figure you're in touch with folks in our community too.
Well, a little bit. There's. This show has been a real blessing to me, because I also do a lot of nonprofits and local stuff. And I have the school district on Thursday. Do you get involved much in the national politics? Tomorrow, I have District 25 Republican candidate Matt Lucci running against Mr. Williams. And it was a funny story. You probably know Lisa Schwartz of Crazy Eights.
I do, yes.
Okay. And she was on the show about 10 days ago, week ago maybe. And I said, Mr. Lucci's going to be in the show. And she goes, "Would you like to talk to Roger Williams?" And I go, "Oh, yeah, sure." He's going to call him up. And she just whips out her phone and starts texting right there. And I got a response. She did anyway, within about 10 minutes. And he's going to be on the show supposedly in April.
Great.
So we'll see what happens. I've never met Mr. Williams, so
okay,
that'll be a lot of fun. But you don't really get involved in the national scene that much?
I'm embarrassed to say I don't. I get so focused on state things. Some folks will ask me sometimes, "Did you see this? Did you see that?" And I said, "No, man. My head was buried in what's going on here and trying to handle stuff here."
There's nothing to be embarrassed about that. It's not always very pleasant. So.
No. And Lisa could have called me too. I would have answered her call as well if she'd have called me.
Yeah. Well, I had talked to your young man, Dalton, I believe his name is. Yeah. Is he like an intern or an employee or what?
So Dalton is my chief of staff.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he's
Okay.
worked with me for several years. I have another fella named Drew Fuller that works for me as well. He started as an intern from Tarleton and was just too good for us to let go, and he's still working for us as well. And but we use a lot of interns during session.
Sure.
Which is a great thing. I love helping those kiddos because I remember what it was like when I came out of college, having no idea what I was going to do.
What college is that?
Tarleton State.
Yeah. I sent a lot of students to Tarleton, and it's even more popular now with that branch over off Chisholm Trail.
Yeah. Could be considered the crown jewel of the Texas A&M system, in my opinion. But
I'm a Baylor graduate, so anything that knocks A&M, I'm good. But it's like, I sent a lot of students to UT as well, and several of them were interns, became interns for various different members of the House, in particular, because, 140 days ain't a lot of time to get things done. I would not mind to see that extended or go annually instead of biannually. We have the shortest terms in the country, but I don't see much movement to change that.
Well, we had over 200 days this time, 260 or something, I think.
Because we always
with the
have
4 sessions,
Yeah,
this
we have
time.
to have special sessions. Why can't
it's tough. You've got to do the work prior and in the interim. We know it's not like and maybe folks need to hear this. We there's a lot of preparation that goes into it. There's a lot of work in the interim, committee hearings across the state. We go where the problems are, and conduct hearings, take public testimony on you name it. You name the issue, and there's a hearing on it somewhere going on in the state. And so then we have our committee findings that we all prepare well before the session starts, and bills start to be filed in November, leading up to the January session when we gavel in January. So it is while we're only there, literally in Austin, I guess, supposed to be for 140 days starting in January. The work is pretty intense, pretty much around the year.
That's what I tell my students in my state and local class, is that if you want to say just 140 days, that's just the tip of the iceberg, really, because you're doing all these other things. I was on the state board for educator certification for a few years, and so I testified at a couple of these hearings.
Okay.
And they were in November, not during the session. And when we were having our meetings during the session times, boy, it was hard to get a table sometimes because everybody in the lobbyists were there and all that. But it was it's a full-time job, and like I said, $7,200 a year ain't it princely sum. I know you get a per diem, but Austin's expensive.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't go very far.
No, it's incredibly expensive to live down there.
So
take care of that.
Yeah. So anyway, like I said, we're almost that time. I'll let you have the last word. So.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me today.
Sure.
I appreciate the questions and the discussion. And I just want to say thank you to the folks that have allowed me to represent you so far as your state representative. I appreciate it. I take it seriously. I'm committed to serving you, and I remain committed to serving you, and until I'm not in this position any longer. I believe I'm prepared to do it, and I'm committed to do it, and I take it and look at it as a ministry, and I would appreciate your vote to let me keep serving you. So just thank you to everybody. Thank you for your prayers, everyone that's offering those, and there's a lot of them, and I appreciate it. I covet those, and thank you for that as well. If I can ever do anything for you, let me know.
Thank you for coming, sir. I learned a lot. It validated a lot of what I've heard. Mr. Hanna, Dale Hanna, was on the show, and he wanted me to pass along his regards and compliments. He has a lot of respect for you. And also, I've talked to 2-3 other people, and they were local elected people, and they said, "Oh yes, we dealt with Mr. Burns on this issue or that issue, and he's very helpful." So I got a lot of good response, and you got a lot of good response. I wish you the very best of luck. I know that you have my vote, and my wife's vote, and if that helps.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's no knock on your opponent. I have no knowledge about who or what she stands for, except I know you now, and I can feel very assured my vote is going to the right place.
Thank you very much. That means a ton.
Thank
appreciate
you,
it.
Taylor. I appreciate you helping me out, whatever the issue was. I'm sure it's user error on my part.
I mean, I'm not going to say that, but...
All right. Anyway, tomorrow I have Matthew Lucci running for District 25 Republican primary, and then on Thursday I have Randy Woolsey from the Burleson CTE program. So we got a nice week coming. Next week, I also have Dan McClendon and Victoria Johnson. So
Great.
it'll be lots of fun. All right. I'll talk to y'all later.